is it that when a man speaks with confidence, he's seen as intelligent? But when a woman does the same, she's often seen as arrogant or trying too hard? Let's explore something deeper than just the surface differences between men and women. Let's question how intelligence itself is perceived and why that perception is often distorted through the lens of gender. We all want to be seen as smart. It's not just about scoring high on tests or rattling off facts. Intelligence is often measured in how people carry themselves, in the way they explain ideas, make decisions, and influence others. But here's the twist. Society doesn't judge intelligence equally, and often it has less to do with the actual intellect of the person and more to do with who that person is. Imagine two individuals, one male, one female, delivering the same presentation. The man might be labeled sharp, strategic, or impressive. The woman? She might get called intense, bossy, or even cold. Nothing changed except the speaker's gender. And yet, the perception changes everything. This isn't just personal opinion, it's backed by decades of research in psychology and social behavior. Studies show that men are more often assumed to be intelligent unless proven otherwise, while women must constantly prove they're smart, again and again, just to be taken seriously. It's like they're running a race where their starting line is miles behind. But let's ask the harder question. Why does this happen? Part of the answer lies in history. For centuries, intellectual spaces, from universities to lecture halls to boardrooms, were dominated by men. Knowledge was something gate-kept and passed down through patriarchal lines. Women were kept out of the room, told that their roles were domestic, emotional, or nurturing, not intellectual. So when women began stepping into these spheres, they were treated not as rightful participants, but as guests. And guests are always being watched more closely. Even today, when women achieve academic or professional success, they are more likely to be questioned, interrupted, or second-guessed. When a man asserts himself, it's called leadership. When a woman does, it's called being difficult. Assertiveness in a man is confidence. In a woman, it's often perceived as aggression. And this isn't just a cultural issue, it affects real lives. Women in workplaces are less likely to be promoted to leadership positions. They're less likely to be credited for ideas in group settings. In meetings, their voices are talked over. In schools, boys are more likely to be called on for answers even when girls raise their hands more often. This creates a long-lasting echo because perception shapes opportunity, and opportunity shapes identity. If you're constantly told you're not as smart or you're treated like your ideas aren't valid, eventually you start to doubt yourself. Not because it's true, but because society keeps handing you a distorted mirror. Now let's dig even deeper. Why is intelligence tied so tightly to how we appear rather than what we know? Because we don't just judge people on facts, we judge based on confidence, tone, posture, even attire, all of which are influenced by gender norms. Men are socially conditioned to speak louder, to take up space, to assert their opinions. Women, on the other hand, are often taught, subtly and explicitly, to be humble, to be agreeable, to smile. So when a woman breaks out of that mold and expresses herself with authority, it disrupts what people expect. And humans don't always respond kindly to disrupted expectations. We label it as arrogance, or we say she's trying too hard. But in truth, she's doing exactly what men have done for centuries. She's claiming her space. And for some, that feels threatening. Even in childhood, we see these patterns begin. Boys are praised for being clever, for figuring things out. Girls are often praised for being well-behaved or helpful. The very words we use start shaping what we believe about intelligence. And this continues into adulthood, subtly infecting our workplaces, our media, even our personal relationships. Think about movies and television. The genius characters are overwhelmingly male. Eccentric, brilliant, often flawed, but respected. When women are portrayed as intelligent, they're often portrayed as cold, unfeeling, or overly ambitious. It's as if intelligence and femininity can't coexist without a cost. And this creates a dilemma for women. Do you soften your intelligence to seem likable? Or do you speak your truth and risk being dismissed? Now, you might think, Things are changing, right? More women in leadership, more representation in media. And yes, progress is real, but the undercurrents remain. Women in powerful positions still report needing to work harder to earn respect. Their authority is questioned more often, their mistakes judged more harshly, their emotions used against them. But let's pause here and consider the broader implications. This isn't just a women's issue, it's a societal issue. Because when we devalue intelligence based on gender, we all lose. We miss out on ideas, innovation, and wisdom. We create environments where people aren't heard. We limit what humanity could be. So what do? First, we need to recognize that intelligence isn't a fixed trait. It's not owned by one gender. It's not about volume or posture or dominance. Real intelligence is diverse. It includes empathy. It includes listening. It includes the courage to challenge bias. Second, we must start questioning our own perceptions. When you hear a woman speaking with authority and you feel tempted to call her too much, ask yourself, would I say that if she were a man? When a man is quiet or collaborative and you think he's weak, ask, am I misjudging what leadership really looks like? We must unlearn the stereotypes that were passed down to us, some quietly, some loudly. Because those stereotypes don't just hurt women, they also box in men. They tell boys that being emotional is weakness, or that they must always appear right even when they're not. That pressure distorts everyone's growth. Let's reimagine what intelligence looks like. Imagine a world where intelligence is recognized in many forms, not just the loudest voice or the fastest answer. Where collaboration is seen as brilliance. Where listening is a skill, not a sign of submission. Where curiosity matters more than certainty. Imagine valuing the woman who questions the norm, the girl who dares to raise her hand, not just with the right answer, but with a challenging question. Imagine making room for voices that don't fit the mold, that interrupt the expected rhythm, because that's where evolution begins. We must stop confusing charisma for competence and volume for value. Intelligence is more than confidence. It's about insight, creativity, resilience. And those come in every gender, every background, every tone of voice. To change this perception, we need to change who gets to speak and who we choose to listen to. Perfect. Here's the expanded ending with a natural outrow, crafted in the same tone as the rest of the piece, reflective, poetic, and thought-provoking, but now closed with a sense of curiosity and subtle suspense to make your audience linger in thought. Start in your circles. In classrooms, make space for every voice. In meetings, amplify the quiet ones. In your own mind, notice when bias creeps in. It's there. It's human. But it can be unlearned. Unlearning isn't a grand gesture. It's a quiet, repeated act. It's pausing before you assume. It's catching yourself when you tune someone out. It's wondering why you believed one person and doubted another. It's not about shame. It's about awareness. Because nothing changes unless it's seen. When someone shares a thought, really listen. Not just for what is said, but for what it reveals. Intelligence doesn't always come dressed in confidence. Sometimes it arrives softly, sometimes it trembles. But it's no less valuable. In fact, it might be the most honest voice in the room. Affirm that voice. Not by speaking for it, but by making space around it. Say, I want to hear your full idea. Say, that's a perspective we haven't considered. Normalize curiosity, normalize care. Build a culture where questions matter more than performances, and begin early. Teach children that intelligence isn't a competition. It's a conversation. That the goal isn't to be right, but to understand. Encourage girls to take up intellectual space without apology. Encourage boys to embrace humility without shame. Let both feel the power of being heard without having to raise their volume. Shift how we talk about smartness. Move it away from trophies and grades and toward openness. A person who listens is smart. A person who admits they don't know yet is wise. A person who learns from others, that's brilliance in motion. Because here's the truth, intelligence is not rare, but opportunity often is. Visibility often is, and we mistake the visible for the exceptional. We forget who wasn't allowed to speak, who wasn't believed, who walked away because no one welcomed them in. Change that. Be the one who notices who's not at the table. Be the one who makes room. Be the one who passes the mic and doesn't take credit. That's leadership. That's intelligence too. And when you catch your own bias, and you will, don't deny it. Don't run from it. Hold it in your hands and look at it gently. Ask where it came from. What taught you that? Who benefited from it? And then let it go. Not just once, but again and again. Because growth isn't a straight line. It loops, it falters, it stumbles and restarts. But each time you choose awareness over assumption, something shifts. A pattern cracks, a door opens. And if enough of us do that, quietly, persistently, imperfectly, we begin to reshape the spaces we move through. The classrooms, the boardrooms, the conversations, the culture. We begin to build a world where no one is assumed less intelligent because of how they look or speak or how confident they seem. A world where genius is not hidden behind stereotypes. A world where intellect is not gatekept, but shared, celebrated, expanded. Not because we finally got it perfect, but because we dared to ask the deeper question. Because we started listening not to the loudest voice in the room, but to the one that almost didn't speak. And maybe, just maybe, intelligence has never been what we thought it was. Maybe the real question isn't who's the smartest in the room, but who's finally being heard in it. And if we sit with that quietly, honestly, what might we hear next?